Audiobook of Notes on Ufo Contact from Itibi-ra. Forward. Ludwig F. Paulman, a health food processing equipment salesman, working in Peru, heard about a giant arrowroot species growing in the upper Peruvian Amazon, Indiana 19966, and set out to find it. He departed from a town called Letitia in an Indian canoe and was taken by a guide up a tributary of the Mari River, where he met with a tribe of villagers who led him deeper into the jungle interior and to an encampment of alien extraterrestrials and saucer-shaped spacecraft. According to the visitors, they come from a planet called Itibi-ra, and they are here to conduct hybrid plant experiments, and to see if plant life from Itibi-ra can be combined with plant life from Earth to create new plant hybrids. This incredible story and the trail of scientific discovery that followed are presented here for the first time in an amazing investigation of contact with aliens from another world. Includes details about the visitors, their home world, their technology, and where they come from. But let us look more detailed into this, as this was not the first rare experience he had had. So this is then introduction to this UFO contact case. The businessman Ludwig Paulman met a strange man in India on a train travel in -64, who helped poor people and had abilities out of this world. His appearance was like white Europeans, but some kind of strange and unearthly, and his beautiful claimed sister Ziti-like. He got a special ring from this man, a kind of communication device. So he had more meetings with them back in 64. Some years later, Paulman had a business travel to Lima, Peru, where he heard some stories of white people having a kind of plantation upside the Mirim River. Those informations made him remember the notable things he had met in India some years back. But later Paulman he got very sick, and was sent to a hospital in Lima, only waiting to death. Then one night, when he hoped to die to get rid of the terrible pains, this Ziti appeared by his bed, and healed him spontaneous. No, she was not an astral angel, and the next day when he came out of the hospital, and the nurses and doctors meant it was a miracle, he shared the next days with Ziti there in Lima. And then he joined her in a trip to visit the plantation base that those human-looking ETs had in the deep jungle by one of the tributary of Drua River, Mirim River, which is on the border of Peru and Brazil. My study, notes from Ufo Contact from Itibi-ra. Headline: Meeting a very strange man and woman in India. The German-born mill machine seller Ludwig Paulman had decided to try a sale push in the Big India in 1964. He was really a linguist, able to talk many languages. He traveled by train but didn't really succeed in the business in neither Bombay nor Calcutta, but took it as a kind of tourist trip. So he bought a ticket for Madras down south on October 10, 1964. In his compartment, opposite to him, sat a rather strange, but well-dressed, nice man with authority. He said his name was Satu-ra. They began to talk, but after some time Paulman noticed this quotation. I was shocked when I saw that his voice came from a device on his chest, rather than from his mouth. As we entered into conversation, I noticed a peculiarity about his speech. Although, as I have already mentioned, his English was impeccable, and he spoke fluently enough, yet there was always a slight but definite hesitation before he spoke. It was as if he were making the mental effort to say the first word, after which all the others would come spontaneously. At some point, the train stopped, and at the station a lot of poor and sick people were gathered. Then this strange man went out and gave those poor people some kind of tablets. Paulman was surprised. When the train started again, the stranger took Paulman with him into the poor class in the train, and there he went about, healing and giving those poor sick travelers those same tablets, and within some minutes he saw recovery and quick changes for the better. Again true amazement. After the train traveled together with this man, named Satu-ra, they went apart. Paulman to a hotel in Madras, thinking of his remarkable trip. After some time, a messenger suddenly came to his hotel door, and bid him to come to a certain house, a mansion, to where he took a taxi. It was as a museum, art gallery, and only Satu-ra was there in this big house. Inside he showed him some art of the, quotation, far Indian gods in flying saucers. And later he also found a similar god picture, as saucer art of pre-Columbian gods. How Satu-ra looked like: he had the light brown skin of a Eurasian, huge dark eyes, a rather small mouth, and an unusual chin line. The lower part of the jaw looked slightly deformed. Then there were those fingertip gloves, which he seemed to wear all times, even though the weather was extremely hot. Above all, there was this peculiarity of speech, this complete reliance upon an electronic gadget to reproduce his voice. There, in that mansion, Palman got a special gold ring from him, which he claimed was many times 10,000 of years old, with a diamond, and it was a kind of communication device also, he said. Again Palman was surprised at the function of the translator device, that he first had believed was a kind of hearing aid. The next day Palman wished to rethink these odd things through alone, so he went down to the shores of the river Ganges. And a lot of people were there, most poor and sick, plus beggars, who hoped to get healed by the sacred river. He then found a more empty place by the shore, but had not been there so long, before this same Satu-ra again appeared. "I thought I would find you here," he said brightly. He was followed by several very old, sick men and women, walking by the river, praying. Satu-ra then asked Palman to join him there, while doing healing and consolation, which he did the rest of that day. There he also met the sister of this Satu-ra, and she was named Siti. She was clothed more like the local poor people, for not getting too much attention. But she did indeed get attention, as she was very beautiful, but most because she made the same healing to those poor people as her brother did. Palman had one more meeting with them while he was in India. And as before, they just knew where he was and just where to find him. A leap forward in time. Palman says he left India 27 October, 64, full of questions regarding Satu-ra and his claimed, beautiful sister Ziti. His only physical proof for himself was the ring he had got from him, which lit up in a strange way. He brought it to a jeweler in Switzerland, who meant it was some very antique jewelry. Picture of it in the book. Headline: Trip to Peru 2 years later. As his business was to sell milling machines, he was at the end of 1966, in Lima, Peru, in the same business. This was more than 2 years after his remarkable adventures in India with those odd people. He met many different people there in Peru, and also an Austrian young man, originally from Innsbruck, working as a guide into the wild deep jungle by the Itibi-ra River. He told Palman he had met some white people deep inside the jungle, who had helped him when he got a deadly fever. White people, such should not really be there. They had also had some abnormal fingertips, and Palman got interested in hearing more. And this guide had got such miracle tablets from them, he claimed. Nobody in the small cities there believed him when he was telling this, as, quotation, "No white men had ever been up there," they meant. This Austrian-born guide also sold on credit some things to the Indians living up the river, but had problems getting paid. He though preferred that kind of free life rather than the plain, civil life in Europe, he said. But back to Palman himself. At one time while there, he had very big pain because of kidney disease, and he had to look up a hospital in Lima, hoping he would rather die as liberation from the terrible pain. Then he tells, in the middle of the night, suddenly came one he had met some years before, Ziti, Satu-ra's sister. She suddenly was there by his bedside, and he hadn't had any contact to her since the India stay. And yes, his ring glowed as it had done before he had had those meetings with them in India. No, she was not only an astral visitor, and so he got one of those miraculous tablets he had seen used in India. It was as an answer to his prayers, he says. But how had she known where to find me? A faint light reflected from the dual talking device that I had last seen in Ben Ayres. Still without speaking, Ziti stretched out her hands to me. Her sensitive fingers, from which she had removed the protective finger-tip gloves, ran lightly over my face with gossamer touch. I did not know how long she had been in the room before she revealed her presence. I do not know how long her healing fingers soothed my sweating, fevered face. But I do know that what with her ministrations and the swift effect of the tablet, the pain eased from my body and I wallowed in the peace. I was free of pain. Even the fever left me. In that moment, I took Ziti into my arms, inhaling the sweet strangeness of her lovely body. Because of the closeness of our embrace, Ziti, hiding her mouth behind a minute veil of silk, I later found out that they use this order to avoid infection, struggled to free herself, pouring broken little melodic nothings into my receptive ears. Ziti stayed with me. We saw dawn come grey, rose, saw the Catholic sisters make their way to chapel, heard their singing to welcome the new tropical day. It was then that I asked her question that had been bothering me: how did she know I was in South America, in Lima, in this hospital? Quotation. In the town he also bought a camera. Despite the Itibi-ra, people didn't like cameras. I understood that besides certain security restrictions, they simply do not care about their looks. They are devoid of all vanity, pride or feeling of superiority. I never saw them use a mirror. Satu-ra, with his metaphysic abilities, therefore knew he had bought the camera, so he confiscated it and kept it, but gave it back before the return to Lima on 27 February. Next headline. Last night talks. On the last night at plantation, Palman was allowed to ask Satu-ra all kind of the last questions, as they had now got messages from their home world to go home. Late in the book Palman writes, "To me his, Satu-ra's, religious wisdom has become a guiding light for my entire life. It is the reason why I began to write this book as soon as I returned to Lima." Again he warns about the Cancer planet, type. A Cancer planet is a universe of its own. A universe, because people on such a planet sincerely believe they do not need God. They have advanced technically in such a way that they have created an entirely artificial pattern of life. They have invented the most sensational machines, gadgets, power equipment, artificial food, color, air, even artificial war, machines and chemical weapons, able to destroy their neighbors. Their artificial way of life has made them believe that they are superior to any other civilization in cosmos. But God, Satu-ra said sadly, has given them cancer. Their inventions and creations, my friend said, are not like the Itibi-ra creations, as they are not working in harmony with God, nature, nor does God, nature work in harmony with them. More than 70% of 5 billion people die of cancer. Still they refuse to believe that cancer is no ordinary sickness. For many years they hope for a cure, a self-made cure against nature. They refuse to believe that God is nature and nature is God. They want to feel superior to cosmophilosophic law, which says, disregarding the laws of nature, is disregarding the laws of God, because God is nature and nature is God. The Itibi-ra people are very much concerned with this our Cancer planet, and he called this planet a total cosmic dropout. Next headline. Life after this contact for Palman. Ludwig Palman later bought a magnificent house in Central America, with outlook to a big lake and the huge and somber San Vicente volcano. Pic.down, seemed to be in El Salvador, not so far from Honduras and Nicaragua. He did that in the intention to write down all in a book about his unbelievable experiences over those years, regarding the people from Itibi-ra. On the second day after I had entered into my private paradise, I got out my typewriter and began to write the story of my adventures with the Itibi-rans, from the day that I first met Satu-ra on the Madras Night Express. He felt an obligation to write the book, in spite he knew that probably no one would believe him, and the big likelihood for being ridiculed. Last contact. 2 weeks after he had taken over the property on the lake, he was sitting outside writing on the book, when the ring grew hot and was shining in the stone. He knew the Itibi-ra ship was not far away, and began watching. It was January 15, 69. He, Satu-ra, arrived some later. And the sad message was that his sister, Ziti, was dead by an accident. He gave Ludwig a metal symbol of a sculpture, a hand holding the flower of the 7 cosmic commandments: and I shall treasure this last delicate memory of a great woman as the most touching present I ever received in my entire life. He mentioned that this many thousand years old relic was of intercosmic origin and not from his home planet. Next headline. 15. January 1969. This last visit to Palman's house was not so far from the great international airport Ilopnigo, and his ship had been seen by many and the story was in the news the following day. Yes, the spacecraft had silently, and for quite a long time, stayed in an observation position directly over the extensive capital town of San Salvador, exposed to the vision of several 100,000 people. Also a neighbor of him had seen the landing of the ship by his home. Some more on Itibi-ra and its people. Satu-ra was born in 25 Aug. In Earth year 1720, which is 250 years old when this meeting took place. About same as early 40s on the Earth. Knew his death to be year 2220. His parents, both biomedical scientists, were still in Kano and lived at Zilox, a nice dwelling by a river. For a term of 7 years, his father was vice president on Itibi-ra. Children stay by their parent until 5.